What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So today I wanted to go ahead and, begrudgingly do a review for Gotham Knights. And most of you already know my position. I'm unapologetically for this game and actually happy with the game as it is right now. Now, the game could be better, but I think it is a project that really has been misunderstood, will be underrated, and then before you know, in 36 months, you're going to see a bunch of these videos popping up saying, oh, Gotham Knights was underrated, oh, Gotham Knights was unfairly blah, 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 and be sure that I will come back with the receipts to basically gloat upon the heads of whoever makes those videos. But anyways, I thought that this is probably going to be something that would serve my community members. Somebody here in the comment section said to me, hey, go ahead and do a review. It's going to help. So because of that one comment, and you guys know it's you guys I'm making these videos for, I'm going to go ahead and give a review on Gotham Knights. I already did write my review on Steam, so that review is going to pretty much guide the highlights and the points that I wanted to go over. I can show you the review here in a bit, but that's not necessarily something that you would really care about. You're more than likely going to be watching and, pretty much engaging with me as I go through some of the highlights that I think really will make this game something that I do recommend for anyone who wants to play this game at all. Now, the very first few things I want to go ahead and point out is, number one, I already have played about 57 hours on PC. I'm on New Game Plus right now. I think I finally reached the Harley Quinn mission again on New Game Plus. I just finally beat the first phase, which is in Blackgate Prison. And so that's pretty much where I am in my own, progression so far. And one thing I wanted to go ahead and quickly highlight before I started into this video is Gotham Knights. The reason I say that this game has been misunderstood is because it is not being seen as a game that is creating itself in a new subgenre for the Batman DC, plethora of games. But I'll go ahead and highlight what I mean in this video. So games that have already come out in the Batman universe that have taken different directions in their own game designs include the Batman Telltale series video games. I haven't really played this game very, much. It wasn't necessarily for me. I think I was able to drop like 30 minutes and I was like, I'm done. This is not a game for me. The Arkham games, on the other hand, it's an entirely different story. I've been able to drop a combined, multiple hundreds of hours on those copies, and they are a different genre. They're action adventure games. The Telltale games have their own different genre as well. Other games in this particular genre, which have already done their own thing, include games like Injustice. Injustice is a game in the DC universe that is not necessarily following the Arkham games or doing anything in an action-adventure side. It is serving the action game, fighting game community. So Gotham Knights is coming in and actually taking time to create an RPG in that whole universe. So right now, in this small plethora of games that have come out in the past, say maybe 10, 12, 13, 14 years, we have action adventure games, we have story driven games, we have a set of fighting games, and now we have an RPG game. So when you look at Gotham Knights, you must look at it from that categorization. If not, you will totally misconstrue and misunderstand the whole project. So I want to go ahead into this review and talk about the different highlights that I think really does make this game quite unique overall. So follow me as I jump into this. So the very first thing that I wanted to go ahead and talk about regarding this game is a modern RPG, and I think it's a really phenomenal game. For many people, they've said that the different aspects of the game in terms of its mechanics are not appealing for superhero games, and I understand that, but that doesn't mean that a game cannot create its own subgenre. For other gamers that enjoy video games like this game is actually appealing to them. Apparently, I didn't really think it would appeal to me, but it actually did. I like some RPG games. I like some games that are live service based looter shooters. I played The Division for many, many hours. And so a game like this, seeing RPG system, power progression, all of that stuff, the game really did fall in line with some of the things that I do like. But there are also other categories of things that somebody who may be wanting to know more about the game will be happy to see. And these are the things that I wanted to go ahead and highlight in this video. So the very first thing that I wanted to go ahead and talk about is the story. The story is something that I would rate a 7 out of 10. Now, the reason about that is because a story for a superhero game is usually very challenging to tell. Many superhero fans are very much inundated, or at least very knowledgeable about the entire plethora of work, story, lore, and so on and so forth that a video game character or many video game actors actually do have. So when you put that in mind, you basically can see how it's hard to be able to fool your audience, or it's hard to be able to hide much from your audience. And so at the end of the day, the story ended up being super predictable. There were story beats and story plots that I wasn't too much of a fan of, like the ending. I thought that was actually not something that they should have done. They should have done it or written it a different way to be able to highlight what it is and drive their message home. And so thereby, I ranked the story a 7 out of 10. Now, in regard to pacing too, you have to also think about the nature of the game. Being that the game had 4 separate characters, the pacing of the game would break over and over again. The best way to experience the story, it's just weird and not necessarily the best way to experience the game, is to actually play through with one character. But then the best way to experience the game is to play all 4 characters. So that actually makes everything so weird. So Gotham Knights is in a really strong and weird place at the same time, in the sense that its different characters are all highlighted very well in terms of the way the story overall is, shown and the way the story progresses. But then in terms of gameplay mechanics, you cannot enjoy, I don't think, fully the experience unless you're going with one character. Now, if you're going on your second playthrough, you might be able to go ahead and do that, because at that point, you would have already honed down your main character and how you enjoy their, combat and how you enjoy their interactions. And then you're going to be able to play everything with that one character. So right now, for my New Game Plus, I'm going to be playing exclusively with Batgirl from beginning to end. And that's pretty much what I've always wanted to do, but it was imperative that I learned the other characters, and they were able to get me through a lot of aspects of the game. Combat is the second aspect that I wanted to go ahead and iterate on. The combat in Gotham Knights is, in my opinion, a very solid combat system. I rank this combat system an 8 out of 10. Now, again, you're playing a very different game. The combat in Gotham Knights is a melee-driven special ability system where you can pretty much find out that it took some notes from the Arkham games, but it is much more similar to games like Spider-Man having a small love child with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And the reason this important distinction is there is because if you think about these categories of games that I showed you in the beginning of the video, the Telltale games, Injustice, and even the Arkham games, you'll realize that all 3 of them execute their combat differently. Gotham Knights does something of its own and wants to stay unique, so it's adopted a whole different combat system. This has caused a lot of people here in the community to say, well, it seems like it's a step back. The animations in terms of fighting seem a little bit slow. They're so wound up and so on and so forth. But honestly, in an animation sense and in a combat-driven sense, this is actually a better way for you to be able to master the combat, because now you're not necessarily dependent on the quick snap animations that the Arkham games had. You actually have to sit back and time your animations properly if you want to really get into the advanced stage. This is what makes Gotham Knights combat actually very good. And I think many people have missed it. It's lost on them that there's a mastery that comes into you reading and learning your animation frames in a combat system where all of your moves are not just, on demand, like say the Arkham games were, or the QTE, like say the Telltale games. And even if you wanted to go even deeper, you could say the Injustice games provided you a fighting game platform where you had to actually learn frames, learn moves, and learn all the kinds of different fighting game, techniques to be able to be better at those games. So it is a very interesting dynamic to talk about combat, but you must talk about it in the context of these other games. So I look at Gotham Knights combat and I say this combat system, I rank it an 8 out of 10 because it does have some complexity, it has depth, and you can do all kinds of creative things with it. Adding the special abilities, which are basically the momentum abilities, really takes it up an entire notch. And then seeing that your character can actually start to craft gear and get items that will augment their power and their combat now gives it one more layer that kind of pushes it above, say, the average combat system. It really does layer itself. And if you're somebody who plays games like The Division, Destiny, or any of these other games where there are power fantasy creeps, you're going to definitely like what Gotham Knights has to provide for combat. And so you move on to the next thing that I wanted to rank, which is Traversal. Now, I rate the traversal system in Gotham Knights an 8 out of 10. It's a very simple ranking because I can tell you exactly why. There's not really anything else to say. And that is number one, the fact that your traversal for your different characters are all unique in the sense of their heroic traversal. The reason I'm even rating it an 8 out of 10 is because you actually have to grind for it. I would have given it a straight 10-10 for creativity on all fronts because you want to put some variety and also allow for some baseline, and the developers actually did that. But then I just deducted 2 points because they made you grind for every single heroic traversal ability. Even though you could do it in, much quicker time or you could get it done faster, I still think it should have been a thing where they made it much of a shorter set of activities. It could have just been tied to the tutorials that were inside of the Belfry rather than have you run around the open world, or at least do maybe 3 or 4. Reducing that number would have made it a little bit much fair. But on the baseline, you can grapple everywhere with every character. You can ride the bat cycle with every character, but then each character has a way that they move around the world. With Red Hood, it's Mystic Leap. With Batgirl, she basically will glide like Batman. With Robin, he uses an Injustice or Justice League. I said Injustice. He uses the Justice League teleportation device, and Dick Grayson just uses a glider. There are gliders in the Batman lore, and the kinds that he uses in those lore, yes, they're somewhat different. They're actually much more closer to what you have when you're using your fast travel, which is something that Lucius Fox basically can give you if you decide that you want to unlock fast travel in the game. Honestly, the world, even though it may be an open world, is not really as it's not really as big as you think. Once you get your heroic traversal, you can do without. But I didn't unlock much of them because I realized that in New Game Plus, you have to unlock them again. So these are some of the things that I would say surrounding traversal. Now, the bat cycle is also another means of traversal, but I wanted to rank it somewhat separately because we've seen another vehicle in another open world game. I ranked the bat cycle somewhere around 8 out of 10 because the bat cycle itself doesn't have the physics that is kind of delightful in the eyes. Say if you're looking at Batman Arkham Knight, it does have the Batmobile, the tank, but again, Warner Brothers gave the team at Rocksteady extra time to develop that Batmobile. I don't know if the team at Warner Brothers Montreal were giving extra time. It didn't seem like it, seeing that their game had frame rate issues. So still, it's a mechanic that they probably could have looked very closely into and prioritized just basic traversal around the world to compensate for it. But it is still a fun system, so this is why I'm still ranking it somewhat high. Crafting and gear. This is another category that I wanted to talk about. When you're looking at this, I think this is a very wonderful system that was put in place, and it was done just right. You can go into your menu, you can go ahead and start crafting gear, and each gear item that you craft will be impactful to you. It will give you the opportunity to earn skins, to be exposed to other stats that you can use to complement your build and make you overall, or give you the potential to be stronger as you go out in the field. So every single aspect of the crafting and the modding system is actually very impactful to your character. It's not as deep as some games like The Division, but it is something that does the job and really does make you see its results in combat. It also does tier up. It basically levels up and gives you stronger gear as you start to do more and more activities, and then puts you in a place where you have to prioritize how you're going to engage with older gear that may not have the stats that you want, and also getting new gear and using them to the way that you can actually leverage their power. So this is something that I think they did just enough because this is a superhero game and you don't want to get too crazy. If they had gotten too deep with this, a lot of people would have been lost. It would not have been appealing to majority of the player base. Regarding the open world, I say the open world to me gets an 8 out of 10. The world does a very good job in layering. You have different places around the whole map that you can go to. You can go to open activities around the world. You can do all kinds of really fun stuff. Some people have said that the world seems a little bland, or the world doesn't seem like it's as photorealistic as other games. I'm not concerned about that. I think it's functional. It does the job. It houses missions. And to me, that already is enough. If I was looking for photorealism, I know exactly where to find that. There's a video game called Tom Clancy's The Division and The Division 2, and this particular game has already a realistic world. It has an entire map of New York City in the first game. It's not a one-to-one representation, not an entire map of New York, an entire map of one of the sections of New York. And then in DC, it took DC to a whole different level, giving you a one-to-one representation of that particular game itself. So I have seen realistic worlds. In fact, let me give you a crazy one. A lot of people who live in New York and DC, when these two games came out, said that they knew the neighborhoods because they went to work passing through those neighborhoods, or they knew areas and they knew locations in the map. So I'm not really too keen on, the way somebody designs their world. I've already gotten what I think is the best of the best in a realistic world in a video game that I actually do play. People might have said some things to me saying, you have low standards. I've seen those comments and I laugh and I say, well, it's not necessarily low standards just because what is there else to see in another world when you've already seen a realistic one, and so on and so forth. So I like the open world. I think it's something that they did a very good job of making it unique. Endgame. Endgame is already a thing, and I'm going to rank this with co-op because in my review, I ranked them both 9 out of 10. So the co-op is actually a very fun mechanic in the game. You can actually jump in with friends. You can jump in with associates. You can actually go and do missions. You can do all of the stuff together, story, side activities, and you can run across the world and do all kinds of activities, and everybody's going to get the rewards for them in regard to XP and even resources. This makes the game so much fun. If you have somebody that you can play the game with, maybe a spouse, maybe a peer, maybe a friend, it really takes the game to a whole different direction, and it's much more personable. It's not something like a 4-person game where it gets crowded and then priorities could be, different all over the place. I played a Division that goes to 4-player, and I can tell you that sometimes it could get, a little weird. But if you're playing with one other person, it's much more goal-oriented. I think they scaled it down just perfectly. Also, they decided that for those who may desire a 4-player aspect, they're going to be bringing the Heroic Assault mode, which is already planned and is going to be coming in November. This tells me that they were thinking a lot about their end game and their continuity. So I really did enjoy that fact, and I ranked it a 9 out of 10. And then finally, the game's fun factor. The game is just a wonderful, fun game. It gets a 10 out of 10 in my book, because that's a very important thing surrounding video games these days, is that they're supposed to be fun. And in a day and age when there are many reviewers who are commercial in their work, and for most of them, they have to play video games to actually get their job done. It could be that it's somewhat monotonous for them to be able to engage with some systems in some games that may provide extra layers. Many of them have actually condemned the combat of Gotham Knights. But what they failed to understand was the combat is actually designed very differently and requires a lot more engagement than games like Batman Arkham. Arkham Knight and Arkham City and all of the others, these combat systems were actually designed for you to be able to go ahead and just jump into the game immediately without having too many hiccups. Games like Marvel Spider-Man and games, across the board that really do give you this, this so-called power fantasy, they're actually out there for you to be able to go ahead and just start playing the game immediately feeling like a beast. Gotham Knights doesn't necessarily give you all of that at the same time. It really allows for you to be able to, get your levels up and do all kinds of other fun stuff and then become stronger before you eventually start to, kick butt. Basically, that's pretty much the entire premise of the game. So I think this conflation has really exposed the fact that a lot of these video game reviews, sometimes will miss some really critical points of a video game. And this has made the game fun. It's really layered a lot of what the game is about. Enemy types require you to be able to do things differently. Like example, this clip I'm showing you with a Court of Owl's Talon. You have to fight them differently. If you try to fight them a normal way like you fight every other enemy, they're going to pummel you. They're going to dodge every single attack and then they're going to beat you. But then you realize that this requires for you to be able to do things differently, time everything, time your animations, and be calculative while in combat. This applies to almost every single enemy type on the streets because they don't really give you a lot of time. They don't sit there for you to have them, show you an indicator for you to be able to counter. So I think this big difference in terms of the entry level has really pushed a lot of people away. And then thereby people have, in a sense, kind of charted the game as a game that's not really fun. And these are some of the points that I wanted to highlight in my reviews. And these are all the pros. The con for Gotham Knights, and I think the biggest challenge the game has faced, is the way that the game has been pretty much built from ground up, thereby affecting its optimization overall. The game suffered on launch from poor optimization and even what I'll call uneven performance more than anything else. I think that's the biggest problem, because in areas of the map, you can play the game at high frame rates, balanced fidelity, and then in some areas of the map, your frame rates cannot even do anything. In fact, you are at a loss when you try that. If you notice, I'm going to jump in this particular footage. If you look at the top right of my video, from 120 to 60 something FPS overall, it was just all over the place to be able to play the game. So this has been a problem. I've been investigating what may have gone wrong and trying to figure out how and why they did this, even though the developers did give a reason. They said that they're untethered open world, and the fact that, they had a complex and detailed design for their world, it could not allow for the game to be able to run at more than 30 FPS on console. But then even on PC, it's also caused the game to struggle for some devices to be able to run. So by and large, this has been the biggest issue with the game, in my opinion, more than anything else. And I think because this issue is something that the developers are going to be looking at, the game is going to be affected here at launch. A lot of my recommendation is going to be based on the different aspects of the game. And also basically the caveat is, if you do not mind the performance, which by and large, it can be easily solved on PC. There are all kinds of tricks. I even have videos showing you how to lock your frame rates based on your machine, where you can get pretty much even performance, but you have to do it yourself, which you shouldn't be doing. But as a PC player, come on, it's not something that will basically break you. All you got to do is basically go change some parameters and you should be fine. And I think once you're able to get to that point where the game performs well, you're going to enjoy the game. Some other things too that I've noticed are bugs, because games like these require some spawning mechanism to be able to get activities, spawn and get them consistent. You're going to see bugs by and large. I've played The Division and The Division 2, and I can tell you that both games, because of the way their open world works, there are bugs everywhere. The Division, on the other hand, is able to mitigate a lot more for those because it runs a lot of its game on a server. So that way they can patch things from their side, quite easily, and they can make sure things, work very well. Because Gotham Knights is not necessarily running a lot of its tasks on the server. They've built the open world, and some people have called them cheap for not using these servers to basically make their game run better. I think that's where the biggest challenge is with those bugs, and fixing them will probably be the biggest priority that they're going to have. And these bugs are not game breaking. They're not minimal. You can actually mitigate for them by actually running, going back to the Belfry and just restarting the night patrols again. Or you can basically go back to the main menu and it will save all of your materials from wherever it is that you actually stopped. So by and large, there are caveats here. There are aspects that the game could be better on and improve upon, like the story, the optimization, some of the bugs that are within the game. But by and large, I just want to say that I can recommend this game to you if you don't mind any of the caveats and if you're actually a fan in this space. Thanks so much for watching the video. I really want to just say thank you to all the people who've been supporting the channel. This has been a very fun journey, covering Gotham Knights for 2 years, looking at the game, not even knowing how the game was going to hit, and then the game showing up. And me actually enjoying the game has been the biggest surprise of 2022 to me. Most of you think, oh, I've been excited about this game from day one. You would be the wrongest person ever. You have to go back and see my old videos where I was very skeptic. And over time, in looking at the way this game was presenting itself, it got me to a place where I understood exactly what this project was trying to bring. Thanks once again for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.